We're live.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Now call this regular meeting of the KCRHA Implementation Board meeting to order. We will start this meeting as we do every meeting, just being grounded in our work in the theory of change, which is if we create a homeless response system that centers people with lived experience, then we will be able to focus on responding to the needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. Just as a reminder, this is a hybrid meeting, as are all of our meetings going forward. We do have a physical location, and we want to thank Mayor Nancy Backus and the City of Auburn for letting us borrow their chambers today. With that being said, Austin, if you can take roll call, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Member Anderson. Member Caminos. Member Carvalho.
Present.
Member Chelmack.
Here.
Member Merritts.
Here.
Member Spotted Elk.
Present.
Member McHenry.
Present.
Member Patnow. Member Ramos. Member Reddy. Member Rankin.
Here.
And Member Ross.
Present.
And the clerk recognizes a quorum.
Awesome. Thank you. Next, we'll move into our land acknowledgement, which is that we acknowledge that King County is located on the unceded traditional land of the Coast Salish peoples. We honor this land and its people past and present, and we are committed to directing funding and resources to organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people. As a part of every meeting, we reserve time for public comment. If you would like to provide comments, please raise your hand in Zoom. And Austin, I'm sorry. Yes, please raise your hand and enter your name and your city in Zoom, and Austin will call on you after we pass our consent agenda. And the only thing on our consent agenda is the approval of minutes from our March 2023 Implementation Board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
A second?
Second.
Thank you, Nate. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any nays? All right, the agenda is approved. We now have 10 minutes for public comment. Again, if you wish to comment and have not already raised your hand or signed in, please do so now and Nate will call on you. I'm sorry, not Nate, Austin. Each person will have 2 minutes to comment, and we ask that comments be related to today's agenda. We will start with the people on Zoom and then move to the people in the room in Auburn, if there are any. Public comment is now open. Austin, are there anyone that has raised their hand?
I have my hand up. I just wanted to let folks know that Lamont is in the public and should be promoted to a panelist. And I was trying to work with him while we were working through the minutes. I believe, and I know as a point of order, it may be awkward, but I was trying to respond to him to get him promoted to a panelist. He was letting me know that he was actually at the last meeting, but is not reflected as such on the minutes. So I don't know, again, I think that's out of, I realize that we just approved those, but I apologize. I was trying to get him in as a panelist and also work that through. So I don't know procedurally what we can do to correct those.
Yeah, I think we can add it. Austin, do you know if we need to do another approval or just if there's any? Sorry.
As the maker of the motion, I would accept that as friendly and just part of the whole. We're still doing Zoom. Does that work, Austin?
Yeah, I will take that.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, John. And as a second point, I wanted to see if there was a way, I realize that we have public comment, but I wanted to see if there was a way to flip the order so that the CEO can give their update first, and then there will be public comment. The reason I say this is I've been thinking about it a lot lately in terms of making sure that there's transparency and full information for people who are giving public comment. I believe that public comment has to be related to an item on the agenda, but because for the CEO update, it just says CEO update, and there's no sort of breakdown about what the topics would be that would be covered there. I wanted to sort of throw that out there for discussion and consideration, that we consider flipping the order so that the public has the benefit of hearing from Mark and then being able to give their public comment, as opposed to sort of giving public comment without necessarily knowing what will be discussed on the agenda.
Yeah, I take no issue. I'm using half a screen, so I'm actually unsure if Mark is even on the call.
He is.
They're here.
They are
Yeah,
here. Okay.
They are here.
I responded to this via email. Just to be clear, Chair, like moving the order of where I give the report does not shift what is on the agenda, and so shift the rules around public comment. And as I mentioned in my response, what I said is that if in the future folks want the bulleted out, like this is what I'm going to talk about, so that then the public is able to respond to that, we're happy to do that. But simply switching the sequence doesn't actually shift the dynamics around what is technically supposed to be allowed. And of course, at the end of the day, it's ultimately sort of the board's discretion what they will choose to hear. So
Ben, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I believe the chat is disabled, and so participants aren't able to request comment.
It is disabled. However, the hands are raised and I took them in order of received.
Oh,
Let's
okay.
see.
So
Yeah.
sorry. So for the participants, you don't, unlike previously, you don't need to put a comment in the chat. You just raise your hand, and then Austin will call on you. And then just to Sarah and Mark's point, I think we've been pretty good about entertaining public comment on a pretty broad range of topics. And certainly I would be supportive of hearing whatever anyone has to say, regardless of a direct link to today's agenda, unless it's obviously wildly off topic.
Is Lamont in the room now?
No, they've not been promoted to panelist yet.
Okay, well, it looks like Austin is working on it. Does any other board members want to weigh in on switching the CEO updates and then doing public comment after? And again, we'll change the agenda in the future. John, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, so I think we probably all know what we're talking about. And I would just presume if the public wants to comment on it, that's one thing. And I would just presume that we should go ahead and do that now, rather than potentially create some form of debate afterward.
To clarify, I'm not talking about anything in particular. I'm just talking about, I know when public comment is given, and maybe people can comment about this when they give public comment, whether they think it would be helpful to hear the CEO update in whatever meeting in any time before they comment, or whether they would rather just give cold comment at the beginning and not know what the CEO's update might cover. So just to be clear on that front, that's what my proposal was.
Okay. Nate, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, no, I think just to Sarah's point, I think what you're drawing on, Sarah, and maybe from my experience too, in somewhat similar organizations where there's a CEO or an executive director, like the executive director's report at the Port of Seattle or the Sound Transit CEO's board of directors meetings, it's the order of the CEO report or the executive director's or verbal report in advance of public comment. And so public comment is able to point to and be responsive to the report. There's not necessarily a written document of those reports with those briefing materials in advance. And so, Sarah, if I'm understanding what you're raising there, both in terms of today's meeting and for future meetings, I think that's the intent to help inform the potential public response in that manner. So I'm supportive of that. Should the motion be made to do that as such today and moving forward.
Thank you, Nate. You did a much more articulate job of expressing my interest and my experience is the same, and I think it will help to make public comment more informed. Thank you.
All right. Well, with that being said, I don't think a change to the agenda requires a motion. Nate, maybe give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if I'm wrong.
I think we've done so in the past, but I'm sure it will be a quick to do should you decide to go through that path, Paula, unless staff advises otherwise.
Well, I'll support moving it. So
Has there been a motion?
If a motion is required, I move to flip the order to enhance public education and information before public comment.
Awesome. Is there a second?
A second.
All right. And a vote, everyone say yay if you are in support of this.
Yay.
Okay.
aye.
Yay.
Yeah.
Any nays? All right, so moved. So we will have the CEO updates next, and then Austin will call people in the order that they raise their hands for public comment.
Sure. I have a very brief update today, and I apologize. I am trying to manage a ongoing issue, which is part of my brief update. And so my attention is a little split today, but you've got the team and a full agenda. So I'm gonna give this update and then I'll remain on the line, but my attention will be a little split. So first is just an update on encampment resolutions. They were a topic when the board last met and also a topic in public comment. The encampment, the Pasadena encampment that folks were, here commenting about has been resolved. And in fact, 2 other encampments were resolved in a similar time frame. One of which was a 146 person actually resolution. It's the largest encampment resolution I've ever worked on in my career. The total number of long-term entrenched encampments that have now been resolved by KCRHA is 14. And over 350 folks are now inside through our encampment facing work specifically. Obviously, that is not the totality of the system, and I always want to be really clear about that. I've seen some quotes in the media, et cetera, saying, well, KCRHA has only housed X number of people and it's, in the hundreds or sometimes in the tens. A gentle reminder to the public that that's always typically a specific operation that we are discussing. The total system throughput for last year was well over 5,000 households and was actually higher than the previous 2 years before that. And so want to make sure that all that context is wrapped around that so that when people excise it, it's all right there. The other update that I have, or substantive update that I have, is just that the KCRHA recently became aware of a LEC program that has some financial difficulties, and we are currently evaluating with state, county, city, and private funders our capacity to respond to the financial difficulties of that program and support residents of it. I don't have any more information at this time. We are actively, it's why I need to step away, frankly. We are actively working to assess what is possible, and I will provide email updates to the board as I am able. I will again clarify for the public, the program is not operated by KCRHA, has not been funded by KCRHA, and has no formal connection at the KCRHA leadership level. For the board's understanding, and again, just for clarity, my understanding is that some system advocates have utilized the hoteling program that the LEC operates as part of their work around Partnership for Zero. My understanding is that at present, that number of folks is roughly 30. And I've reviewed their housing plans with the team and understand where they're going to. There's a much larger number of people who I think we are still trying to understand what their path may be and what support we can offer. There are a number of questions, frankly, that have been raised at the governing committee level and by members of the community, certainly within other spaces in government and with our philanthropic partners about the program and sort of how it operated, et cetera. And a special meeting of the implementation board is currently being calendared. It'll be joint, meaning the invitations have also been extended to the governing committee chairs and other governing committee members to attend that session. We will also invite the advisory committee chairs to attend that session as well, so that we are all able to digest the available information and ask questions together. And that is the end of my update.
Sarah, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, just had a quick question. I know an audit is being conducted and there'll be a lot of information that will help to shed light on this issue. But because you commented on a special meeting being set up, I did want to say that I saw an email saying that checking to see if there was appetite for one, but I didn't see any further communication. So if there is a special meeting, I don't know if any of the other board members have seen anything more on that, but if there is actually substantial planning occurring for that special meeting, I haven't seen any further information about that, and would appreciate being kept abreast.
Yeah, at this point, the team is working to isolate dates that work for the governing committee chairs, and then running that back through calendar, and we'll distribute doodle poll, et cetera. I'll be working with the executive committee to pull together the agenda for that session, as well as the governing committee chairs or their designees. And would ask that board members keep in routine contact with the executive committee about what they would like to see on that agenda.
Are there any other questions for Mark before we move on to public comment?
I've got a question. Sorry, I'm looking for the button. It's disappeared. May I ask a question?
Yep.
Thank you for that update, Mark. I have just two questions. I'll ask them together. Firstly, with the 30 people that came from RHA programs and are staying in the hotel locations now, do you know which RHA programs they came from? And do you know if the LEC received any compensation or reimbursement of the costs from the RHA for those stays? And second question, can you explain the rationale for why this board won't be getting the ability to discuss this, and that we're going to be doing it together with the governing committee? That seems a bit unusual for us to tie up such an important issue with the mayor and the executive's calendar. I feel like this board is, being the implementation board, is probably, to me, my mind, would be the right place to have that first. So just want to understand your rationale on that.
On the first question, I don't have, so my understanding is that the placements came through system advocates, which mean they'd be tethered to Partnership for Zero. In terms of compensation, I don't believe so, because we don't fund this program. So I'm not like, if there were dollars that moved to the LEC around this, that would be something that would be news to me and would need to, I've referred some of this already for internal investigation to try to understand, again, some of these interactions. But the flexible funding that system advocates have at their disposal to support, immediate needs of folks should have been available to support hotel motel placements if they were necessary. I have some questions, frankly, about why that was not the utilized fund source, and we'll get to the bottom of that. On your second question, I frankly think it's better directed to Executive Constantine, Mayor Harrell, and the executive committee. Like, they would like to be involved, and I'm not sure why I'm receiving that question. And so I don't know if Paula wants to speak to that. Otherwise, I'm happy to schedule time for folks or for, I guess, you, Ben, to chat with Deputy Mayor Washington and the team in the mayor's office about their engagement and curiosity.
Are you saying that the mayor and the executive are the ones who are directly asking that you not bring this issue to your implementation board, or bring it to them only?
The governing committee is part of the governance of this agency, and the governing committee has requested their involvement.
Okay. And they're requesting you to not do an update independent with the implementation board? I just want to make sure I'm clear where this is coming from.
So my understanding is that the entire implementation board will be invited. The governing chairs and the advisory chairs will be invited. And I think if others would like to join, it's open. But I mean, scheduling for us is a nightmare already. If you add on 2 other boards, I believe it's not going to make things a lot easier. So I think we should let Taj and Austin and the other admin staff try their best to get as much of us in the same room at the same time.
Okay, just to be clear, Mayor Harrell and Executive Constantine are welcome to join any meetings on my calendar whenever they like, but I don't think I'm comfortable tying this up indefinitely, waiting on their very busy schedules. And I think that my reading of our governance is that these kinds of issues should flow through the implementation board. And if they want an update, obviously they're entitled to it as well. But if we're talking about something that's going to happen next week, that's great. But if this is going to be months and months, I think that we should go back to the idea of having a full update on this topic with this board. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for the answers to my both of those questions, Mark.
Gordon, I see your hand is up.
I appreciate the update from CEO Dones. Just thinking a little bit about the colloquy that just happened, and I think there is a need for coordination and collaboration. I think the RHA, our design structure is unique and sometimes complex. I think this issue, which is emergent and urgent, is one that's worthy of a collaborative look, if it can be done in a timely manner. And then I think the other thing is aspect, of course, which is when is that right time? So yeah, we don't want to wait too long, but we also don't want to convene a lot of folks and we don't have foundational information. So my understanding from this process, and I've been involved to a certain degree, is that it's very fluid. It's evolving daily. It's not resolved, and so I do think it's appropriate for RHA to be very focused on understanding where the RHA can help. And then I agree with Ben, we should not let too much time go by, but I also don't feel we need to be so rushed that we convene a lot of folks who have interest and ability to help, hopefully, but there's not sufficient information to take action to even understand what the status is, much less what happened or what's the next steps. So I know that's a lot of grayness, but I just want to add my perspective. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Gordon. With that, we're going to move over to public comment. Again, we have 10 minutes. Each individual would have 2 minutes to comment, and then we will move on. Again, we're going to start with the people on Zoom and then move to the room. I also want to recognize that we have 14 hands raised and 10 minutes. So I, want to ask people to be as brief as possible. I mean, we will try to get people in, but we don't have the capacity to make half of this meeting public comment. So again, asking people to be brief, and then with that, I will hand it over to Austin to call on people for public comment.
Paula?
Yes.
Would you be open to a motion to extend the time for public comment beyond 10 minutes?
I am open to extend the time. I am not open to extending the time by 30 minutes or by 20 minutes. I don't think that we have enough time to take everyone's comment unless people could be really brief. So can we wait on Ben? Are you wanting to make that motion right now or see where we are in 10 minutes?
Well, I'd like to make sure that we have clarity on how much time people can take. So I think it might make sense to just fix a time at this point. And for my part, I would be supportive of making sure everybody gets heard. So I guess my motion is to perhaps extend it to 28 minutes, 2 minutes for each of the people.
Second that motion.
Do we have a vote? Well, we have a motion and we have a second. So can I see where people are as far as taking 28 minutes for public comment?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you just call for a vote, Paula?
No.
Yes, I did. I'm sorry.
Okay, is it a voice vote or, sorry?
It is a voice vote. If you would like to extend the time to 28 minutes for public comment, we have a motion and we have a second. So all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
I believe that it moved.
Yes.
Austin, did you? Okay.
Yes, sorry, I was muted. The clerk recognizes 28 minutes. I have it mostly in the order of the hands raised received. Let me do this. Taj, if you can share your screen. I don't know if I need to give you special permissions. Perfect.
I also want to recognize that Nate said if people would like to put things in comment and written form, they are welcome to do that as well.
Awesome. So I'm going to be starting.
Sorry, I just want to follow up on that because I was just going to add something to the chat. How could they do that though? Because I think the chat is disabled for the public. That is to me new. I feel like in the past there's been an option for people to do that. So how can folks, I agree with Nate that it would be helpful for people to be able to convey their comments in written form. Also, what would the means be for them to do that?
It also might make things go a bit faster. Some people prefer to just put their comments in the chat too.
I just, I'm sorry, Chair, I see you're unmuted and wanted to jump in as well, just to clarify my comment. I know we run into this in the past in the few years that we've been in operation, and I think at times we've had evolutions or iterations of a dedicated email address. Defer to staff to speak up verbally, but I think we should say verbally that there's a dedicated email address. Is there a dedicated page on our website that folks can write in advance of this? Could we have Austin or someone staff summarize written comments to help? We have a lot to cover every month for 2 hours that are set forth. We have a stack calendar that you, Chair, and our executive committee identify, working with staff in advance, that you spend 2 meetings twice a month to prepare us for. And then all of a sudden, we want to make sure we also accommodate everyone that comes here for public comment period. So we need to make sure that we're addressing this today and for future meetings in a way that everyone wins.
Awesome. Austin, do you have a recommendation on how we can all receive the public comment in chat?
In chat, we could turn on the chat. It's been kind of we can do that. Also, my email as well can also receive public comment. It's found on the website. It's austin.christofferson@kcrj.org. That is also where I will compile all the public comment and make sure it gets to the board members listserv as well. I will aim to have a summary made up by the end of the week to provide to the board members.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I think, oh, and I want to recognize that Pastor Anderson has also joined us.
Awesome. Hello, Pastor Anderson. Awesome. So are we ready to get to public comment?
Yes, please.
Awesome. Sweet. So we are going to start with Andrea from We Heart Seattle. Andrea, We Heart Seattle. Andrea,
Yep,
you
can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. You're off mute. You have 2 minutes. Begin.
Great. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for your update, Mark. We Heart Seattle is a private funded waste management as a form of harm reduction provider plus outreach. We have data. We get people off the streets weekly into treatment. Just today, we got 2 people into battlefield addiction who were languishing and suffering with fentanyl addiction in Pioneer Square today. They're now indoors, and we're going to fund that program $15,000 times 2 people. That's what we're using our funds for. I'd like to get that data to King County Regional Housing Authority, and we'll go on record again to ask Mark and Ann and his team to meet with us so we can transfer these types of data points to you. I've also like to call out in our outreach that we see what we call chill tents or hangout tents or community tents for folks that have hotels down in Kent who have permanent supportive housing, who've been resolved, if you will, but still are in our parks and shared spaces. And I'm wondering what the RHA is doing to hold themselves accountable and those accepting housing to not end up back on the streets, dealing drugs, using drugs, and whatever their hustle is. I would like to know what the schedule is of the advocates. I don't see the outreach workers out there. I'd like to know if, what part of the county they're in, because I get a lot of questions around that. And I'd like to support that program for you by being informed. I would like to ask that the RHA consider funding in some way the Camp United We Stand. They are in and out of Snohomish County as well as King County. It's a great sanctioned camp with services, toilet, supplies, kitchen, services from We Heart Seattle, and we send people there all the time and get them off the streets and into a community. And I was in a permanent supportive housing complex over the weekend. It was filled with fentanyl and squalor, and I would like to know how permanent supportive housing will work in the future if we can't figure out how it's working today.
Andrea, the 2 minutes has concluded. We appreciate your comment. Have a great day. Next up is Michelle Eastman. Michelle Eastman. Allowed you to talk.
Hello, everyone.
Awesome.
So my name is Michelle Eastman. I am the Director of Communications for the Washington State Lived Experience Coalition. And I wanted to say thank you for allowing me to speak today. I advocate that the postpone the bylaw vote until all lived experience seats have been confirmed because of the importance of making sure lived experience voices are heard and centered, and not just on an individual level. And for too long, a lived experience has not had a seat at the table. So, but from our work in many areas, and at the Housing Command Center, we show the value of lived experience and have 5 folks deeply engaged in elevating the voices of the marginalized. The LEC has dramatically bolstered the numbers in the Partnership for Zero Zone by getting 90 people off the streets and into hotels, and have over 130 folks that were in the Partnership for Zero Zone. Recognize that there may be concerns about the hoteling respite. We believe those questions will be answered in the audit. So going forward, making sure that we focus on confirming people and making sure that the bylaws are postponed until the people have been confirmed. That is what I'm advocating for today. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate you coming out and talking. Next up is Bruce Drager. Bruce, please unmute. And once you begin, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, well, I spoke with you guys last month, and I felt like I didn't get to my punchline. I guess I didn't practice enough. But as you guys all know, and I don't know if the distinction is made, and it needs to be held up and made for the public, that there are basically sort of two brands, at least two brands of resolutions taking place. There's the Bruce Harrell brand that is sweep with impunity, and then there is what you guys are doing at KCRHA, which I fully applaud and commend you about. And I work with the Bruce Harrell folks that are getting swept, and my jam, as I told you, is I go out there and I get to know all these folks in these swept camps, and I've worked with people in over 30 camps in the last year. The take home from my last time when I came was that it doesn't work, because only 10% of those folks that I work with in the camps are accepting viable housing, transitional housing offers, and only 2% of those folks are getting into permanent housing from that. So clearly it doesn't work. It doesn't work for the homeless. It makes them much more vulnerable, and it doesn't work for the community because it just plays whack-a-mole and they end up somewhere else, including, as you may know, and it just turns out that I'm sort of at the center of this, because this individual that burned down this boatyard, I have been working with, and I had been working with him at a camp and getting him through community court. He was swept for the 7th time in a year and had no place to go. Had been shunned by some of the new camps that he's trying to get into, and he ended up in that boatyard. I move that somebody stand up for the KCRHA and repeat what it is that Bruce Harrell is doing with impunity, because it just is not working for anybody.
Alrighty, Bruce, your 2 minutes is up. Thank you so much. Next up is Josh Castle. Josh Castle. Josh, unmute. Once unmuted, you have 2 minutes.
There we go. Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the Implementation Board. My name is Josh Castle. I'm the Community Engagement Director for the Low Income Housing Institute. I'm testifying today on the 5-year plan. While we are waiting for the plan to be finalized and released, our overall sense is that the plan is moving in the right direction. We wanted to thank the Implementation Board members and RHA staff for making improvements and all your work on it. We especially appreciate your putting more of a focus on the needs of the currently unsheltered. We fully agree that we must rapidly address the crisis of the unsheltered, and lives depend on it. The record number of deaths of people living outside last year is totally unacceptable, and it must be our highest priority to address this humanitarian crisis full on. We and the many community members and leaders who have testified for months continue to believe that the 5-year plan should set bolder goals for building non-congregate, cost-effective, high-quality, enhanced shelters, such as tiny house villages. Renting hotels to shelter the homeless is not a sustainable or cost-effective solution. We must have a longer-term strategy that is centered around programs that are highly effective at getting people quickly into permanent housing and are a far better return on taxpayer dollars. Our hope is that RHA embraces those proven strategies and expands the existing portfolio so more providers can adopt tiny house villages as an interim solution and stepping stone to permanent housing. We're also grateful for your focus on engagement in faith partnerships in the provision of emergency shelter and on expanding winter shelter resources. Please continue to build on these areas in the final adoption of the 5-year plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Josh. Next up, we have Andrew Constantino. Andrew, once you are unmuted, you have 2 minutes.
Hi. My name's Andrew Constantino, and I work doing street outreach in Seattle. I'm happy that the revisions to the 5-year plan are now emphasizing unsheltered homelessness urgently. Every day I engage with clients outside assertively or as part of mitigating sweeps, euphemistically referred to as resolutions. Folks outside are often desperate for an option of a place they can stay or park, but there simply aren't enough options available. We need more safe, supportive shelter that folks can access. Congregate shelters, sanctioned tent encampments, RV parking, and the one most asked for, tiny house villages. Hotel stays are awesome, and I'm happy when clients can get a temporary room in one, but these are simply too expensive to meet the needs of all those currently outside. Every opening at a tiny house has dozens of clients competing for it. This becomes even more dire during severe weather events. Just imagine a world where we had adequate spaces there, where every village had 5 openings every day. Then anyone in need could simply ask for help, and these flexible spaces could be used in response to severe weather. Sweeping encampments and RVs, as well as allowing these spaces to sit and become unstable, helps no one. We need more shelter options and behavioral health of every kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next, we move on to Bill. Where did Bill go? Bill Kierlin Hackett. Bill, you once unmuted, you have 2 minutes beginning.
Thank you, Reverend Bill Kierlin Hackett, Interfaith Task Force on Homelessness. Board members, consider the street outreach staff working with vehicle residents in Seattle. The authority funds this staff to create pathways to stability where people live in vehicles. The streets, in turn, are ruled by the laws of the city. Outreach teams aim to bring stability to what is chaos. Living in a vehicle is burdened by the chaos of being homeless, but also relentlessly burdened by Seattle's remediations, removals, and relocations, and again soon scofflaw. City actions can better be called simply sweeps. If a vehicle cannot move, it is impounded, which simply detours the work being done by outreach. Also, the sweeps of vehicles offer no separate shelter as required by Martin v. Boise. Here's the rub. The authority funds and seeks coordinated protocols for addressing homelessness. The city controls the terrain. Unless the rules applied on the terrain accord with the funding goals and the protocol coordination, there is chaos for the most vulnerable, who pay the price for this failure of coordination. The city sweeps help only the city. These are impediments and bring additional harm. Jurisdictions can and are sabotaging the work of pathways to stability for those living in vehicles. You must act. Please gain agreements with jurisdictions as to the behavior of cities as partners in ending homelessness. Amend the ILA if necessary. Laws are better enforced through partnerships with outreach first. That is not happening. Further, the cities cannot wag the dog's tail by determining where outreach must go by using its sweeps threateningly at targeted sites. Even innovative work that we're proposing, like street safe zones, is stalled because we cannot even gain a meeting with decision makers in the city to alleviate the harm that law, and I mean the whole scope of law, is doing. KCRA must seek that this disconnect change. And I want to thank the staff who are working hard. And I also want to throw out a thank you to Michael Ramos.
Thank you, Bill. Next up, I have a CMW on Zoom. CMW. CMW, once you are unmuted, you have 2 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, and if you could state your name, that'd be
Oh, yes. Hi,
appreciated.
my name is Coco, and I live in Seattle, and I just came from the wheel vigil for the Women in Black standing. We stood outside for an hour for all the people who have died, over 30 people last month. And I also have a friend who died after 3 sheriffs came to evict her last month, or like a couple weeks ago. So when I saw that there is a situation where hundreds of people are going to be turned out from their hotels, and your group had people who were putting people in those hotels. I just really, really want to encourage you all to take the opportunity to rise up and say, maybe this wasn't officially our responsibility, and yet people were trying to save folks' lives, getting them out off the street, and lives were saved given how many people are dying outside each year. So I really would encourage this coalition to say, this might not have been our bottom line to start with, but we have people who are putting those people in those hotels, and we're going to do everything that we can in order to make sure that people are not just thrown out without a plan. I also really want to encourage you all to work with the city of Seattle to encourage the council is going to talk about sweeps. I'm sure you all saw the study that finally the scientists proved what everybody with lived experience has been saying, that sweeps are killing our people outside, and to show up to that meeting and engage and encourage the council and encourage the mayor to say, like, this can no longer be a city policy. This is a policy of state violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Alice Nawaz. I apologize if I say it incorrectly. Alice, once you are unmuted, you have 2 minutes to give public comment. Alice, it appears you are still muted.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries.
Hi, my name is Alice Nawaz, and I am on the leadership team for the Washington State Lived Experience Coalition. And I would like to say that I know that the implementation board is having a retreat on April 14th. And we, the people of the LEC, encourage the board to ask themselves, how well is the implementation board doing with centering the theory of change? How do our unhoused neighbors feel they are being treated? The work that we are doing to decolonize systems is crucial. We should stop finger pointing and start problem solving. If we want to point a finger, we need to point at the system. We need to flip the script on the model of development to augment what Ron Chisholm, co-founder of the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. Poor people don't need programming, they need their power back. This is especially true for the historically marginalized and oppressed, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, LGBTQ2S+, and poor people. If we are going to end homelessness and complete the work of creating a more responsive system together in the co-development of solutions with those closest to the problems, it's going to have to be by centering those with lived experience as described in the theory of change. Our theory of change states if we create a homeless response system that centers people who have lived experience of homelessness, then we will be able to focus on responding to needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
And thank you, Alice. Next up I have is Courtney Love. Courtney, as soon as you unmute, you have 2 minutes.
My name is Courtney Love. I am the Director for State and Local Advocacy for the Washington State Lived Experience Coalition. I would like to, I ask that there is a delay in the vote for the bylaws until after the lived experience members are confirmed and seated. And those confirmed and seated, confirmed by the ad hoc continuum of care board meeting tomorrow, be included in the retreat that the implementation board has on Friday, and the alternates as well. And I would like to point out that we have had continued and direct contact with KCRHA leadership, including Director Dones, regarding what we've been doing. And we are in a position where we are quite confident in the outcome of the process. And we stand tall and united and excited to serve, to represent as a constituency-based group those most impacted, including the people who are currently impacted on the streets in King County. We are a statewide organization centered and strongest in King County. And we look forward to continuing our work together and building and changing the system to better serve those impacted. And as Mr. Ron Chisholm says, co-founder of the People's Institute, he says, poor people don't need programs, they need their power back. And we're here for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Courtney. Next up, we have Mike Mathis. Mike, as soon as you unmute, you have 2 minutes.
Hey, my name is Mike Mathias. I'm the Executive Director of Anything Helps here in Seattle. I'm here today to bring your attention to the findings of a 10-year study recently published in the Journal of the American Medical Association that demonstrates the devastating health consequences for people experiencing homelessness who are involuntarily displaced. The findings show that forcing people to relocate contributed to 15 to 25% of deaths among the unsheltered population over the last 10 years in 26 different cities. They also show that people are over 3 times more likely to die within 6 months compared to those who are not displaced. Involuntary displacement should only be used as a last resort, and we must listen to the preferences of our community's most vulnerable members and offer them options that they perceive as a net gain in their overall welfare when we're discussing the removal of encampments and the removal of temporary housing options. I urge the board and the RHA staff to consider these findings when making decisions related to the current hoteling controversy with the LEC, whom, as Michelle Eastman and many other LEC members have stated during public comment here, have had daily involvement with the KCRHA's Partnership for Zero program through its Housing Command Center over the last year. Thank you for your attention to this important issue. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mike. Next up, we have Shanae Marie. Shanae, once unmute, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Shanae Marie Colston. I wear various hats in our community. And so the first hat today I'm going to wear is Shanae Colston, the Consumer of Services. Earlier, Mark Jones had spoke to saying that KCRHA did not have direct hand in housing families or persons or individual or unhoused neighbors and community members in hotels with LEC. And I want to say as a consumer of that, it was under direct orders from a KCRHA what do you call that, employee, that me and my family were housed back into a shelter. And so we could play back that because when that was done, that was also a public meeting at that time. But I just want to clarify that that was a direct order given by KCRHA staff to LEC members to house me and my family. The second thing is that that hat is now gone. I'm no longer the consumer. My new hat comes on as the Continuum of Care Board's co-chair. I'm speaking in regards to the bylaws, like I need them held off. Like Paula emailed us last week and was like, hey, don't vote on the members because there's some concerns. And so we voted as them not to. And then yet we find out like you guys are going to pass bylaws and now you guys are having this retreat. And I just want to speak like, I get that there's concerns and challenges that you have with the LEC, but the fact of the matter is that the ILA says that lived experience, right? So it doesn't have to be people from the LEC, but it has to be people with lived experience, and those 3 seats aren't seated. So I don't understand how you guys are making these decisions without those being present. So until then, I'm going to advise you guys to like have Karen Taylor, who is an alternative from the get-go, and Lamont Green either set in those seats as lived experience until we figure out all this hoopla on the side, or like you guys are literally in violation of what it says. And you guys can read it under the Article V111 Organization of Authority, and about 4th paragraph down. It says what the law is, and we're breaking that right now by not having those seats filled.
Shanae, thank you. Your 2 minutes is up.
Thanks.
Next up, we have the person in Zoom called the Coalition on Homelessness. Coalition on Homelessness, if you can please state your name, unmute, and then your 2 minutes begins.
Of course, thank you. Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Sarah Robbins, and I am the Senior Policy Manager at the Seattle-King County Coalition on Homelessness. I am here today to testify on the KCRHA's proposed budget. I have reviewed what was posted online for the proposed 2024 budget. And the thing that I see glaringly missing is anything having to do with wage increases or additional capacity for essential workers in our homeless service programs. This to me looks like a budget that is mostly a status quo budget, but as in line with everything that you are prioritizing in the 5-year plan, the things that we know about the homeless services sector, the turnover, inability to fill positions, programs that are understaffed, have, very high turnover rates. We know wage equity for essential work is crucial to keeping this sector both strong and being able to maintain. And I don't see anything in the proposed budget that addresses wage equity. I would ask that you ask questions about that, see where that can potentially, fund sources where that can come from, and how that can be incorporated into a next iteration of this proposed budget. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for your time. Next up is Anitra Freeman. Anitra, once you unmute, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Anitra Freeman. Today, WHEEL Women in Black just stood vigil for 32 homeless people who died outside in March. Homeless people are dying in King County at a rate of nearly 1 a day. Homelessness and the number of homeless deaths are worse than ever before. KCRHA was supposedly set up to organize and coordinate the homeless response system, but frankly, you folks have not been very coordinated and organized. Several crises and failures require you all to act now. WHEEL and homeless women are particularly impacted, but we all are suffering by your inaction. We need you to restart the Women's Hotel Voucher Program immediately, save 250 people from hotel eviction, support the WHEEL First Presbyterian Shelter move with capital funding, create capital funding to support all shelters and programs facing unexpected crises. Many lives are at stake. No more excuses. Your action is needed now. Thank you.
Thank you. And then last for Zoom public comment is Elizabeth Mupin. Elizabeth, if you can unmute, then your 2 minutes will begin. Elizabeth, are you there? Elizabeth, we cannot hear you. If you can unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Elizabeth.
Okay, I'm
Your
sorry.
2 minutes begins now. Thank you.
I'm a member of the Washington State Lived Experience Coalition from Issaquah in East King County. And I would like to second what Courtney Love said about needing people with lived experience to be involved in the analysis of your bylaws. There shouldn't be any vote on bylaws without all the seats filled on the board. The ILA has a requirement that the board members represent a constituency, and people put forward by the LEC are chosen by and held accountable by others with lived experience. I'd also like to say that I know that there are some rumors going around, and I want to assure you that the Lived Experience Coalition did not directly mismanage funds. We noticed issues with our fiscal sponsor and took measures last year to become our own 501c3. We hired an accountant in December, and in March started working on transition plans to have the LEC assume more direct control of our financial responsibilities. Our community organizers have been doing a pretty good job of ensuring that people are not left on the streets. I would caution everyone to withhold judgment until there is a full accounting of events, and to ensure that the accountability is there and that the safety of the unhoused is protected. I really want to thank you for centering the theory of change and giving preference to lived experience persons in the position of co-chairs in your bylaws. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That concludes what we have here on Zoom. I would like to check with Taj to ensure that there is nobody in the City of Auburn City Hall.
Hello, everyone. We do not have anyone here at Auburn City Hall for public comment.
Awesome. And then with that, that concludes public comment. Just a reminder, if you do wish to write public comment, please feel free to email me at austin.christofferson@kcrha.org. By Friday, I will compile an email and send that to the members. Pass it back to you, Paula.
Awesome. Thank you. And Austin, maybe, because you do have quite a long name, maybe if you could put that in.
I do plan to put it in chat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sarah, I see that you have your hands up.
I just quickly wanted to thank all the implementation board members for making that adjustment, both in terms of the order and in terms of the time for public comment. I think it's really important and valuable for us to have rich and robust feedback. So I just wanted to say thank you. I found that feedback was a really important part of our work.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to everyone who provided public comment. I want to now move on. We have Alexis and her team here to give us an update on the 5-year plan. Alexis, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, board members. I'm joined here today with the rest of the sub-regional planning team to provide an update on the 5-year planning process. And so as I get my screen up and running, I'd love to take a moment to just say a couple of words just about the process and express appreciation for public comment today. Today's presentation is going to be covered by the full sub-regional planning team who have been developing and supporting the feedback and revision process in the 5-year plan. I'll be kicking us off with a bit of a refresher on the work of all the work that has gone into plan development over the past 11 months, from content development, engagement, and feedback. You will then hear an update from the System Planning Subcommittee Chair. As a reminder, the System Planning Subcommittee has been the body reviewing and informing changes on the draft 5-year plan that was published in January. And following that, the sub-regional planners, Abby Anderson, Mallory Van Abema, and Sparrow Edder Carlson will be walking through some of the core changes that have been underway on the 5-year plan. We'll close with time for questions, so I will ask the board to hold their questions until the end, and then there'll be time for discussion regarding the materials in today's board packet. And as we go through today's presentation, I do want to voice that we will continue to have dedicated time and space weekly on Thursdays, 3 to 5 o'clock, a lovely 2-hour meeting where the System Planning Subcommittee will be taking up and reviewing changes to the plan. And I hope today's presentation leaves the public watching today with an overarching message that we've heard feedback loud and clear, and we've made changes to the plan accordingly. And so I will be sharing my screen and taking us into a bit of a refresher about where we've been. And so when we go into just our starting point back in summer 2022. The findings of the implementation board retreat related to shared definition from our current state to future state was one of our starting places. And building from the findings of the board retreat last year, we then started a series of workshops in community with providers, city partners, community leaders on a variety of topics, while also working to bring in and get feedback on our procurement processes, data and reporting. And we held a series of sub-regional focused workshops and district workshops that included system partners and other community leaders as well. And throughout that process, we really gained a better understanding of what community priorities were, things such as broader affordable housing for this community, the need for wage equity for frontline staff, leading with a approach of centering the voices of those with lived experience and working on improving racially equitable outcomes, while also focusing on some of the major service gaps when it comes to our subregions and the needs of subpopulations. And further, as we've been moving through this work, our core values remain the same. We are continuing to uphold this commitment to centering the voices of those with lived experience and leading with a racially equitable lens. And as we've been reminded and encouraged by our lived experience colleagues, that everything in the 5-year plan must be operating within this paradigm. And we've been able to maintain and engage strongly throughout plan development. And so moving us into then working towards fall, we moved into a second phase of engagement, which focused on subpopulations and systems, as you can see on the slide here. And further in our staff development of some of the initiatives that went forth in the plan, we utilized a tool known as the Anti-Racist Strategy Chart to draft proposed initiatives to really spark the conversation. And we brought the proposed initiatives that staff had worked on to work groups that were focused on distinct subpopulations and systems, again, to spark the conversation and really develop a better understanding of whether the initiatives that had been put together were aligned with community priorities, we're speaking to the right level of need. And then we were able to further have community partners inform how we would go about doing that thing or that initiative. And so what we landed on in November was an initial draft structure of the plan. This is what was presented to the implementation board. This was the initial outline of the plan and how it was structured, with a focus on goals, objectives, and initiatives, with a series of objective charts with metrics attached to each, and then detailing some of the supporting initiatives. And originally we had initially 7 goals detailed throughout the plan. What then followed was in January, we published the draft plan for public comment, and we had an exciting period known as our public comment period. We released a draft survey, which received over 640 responses. And as you can see by the graph to the right, there was robust regional representation across those responses. We were able to not only glean regional responses, but also be able to better understand some of the most and least supportive strategies that were detailed in the plan, and also take into account bringing in, again, current or past lived experience respondents, and given some of the lower response rates of folks that had current experience, lived experience, we did go out to directly engage with some folks currently experiencing homelessness on elements of the plan. The team then went through and read over 1,000 narrative comments and coded for themes. So did a bit of thematic coding across the comments. So the findings of that thematic coding was included in the, I believe it was the February or March packet, apologies. And so we can ensure that that content is found. And so a synthesis of all of the feedback is included in that memo, and KCRHA staff put together a slate of recommended revisions, also included and attached to that memo. And in the spirit of, we wanted to provide this recommendation memo to the board just to really document the breadth and depth of the feedback that had been received, and then also to maintain a level of accountability and transparency about all the feedback that KCRHA staff were getting. And what followed was the stand-up of the Implementation Board System Planning Subcommittee to review staff recommendations and support the revision process in the 5-year plan. And so the following process was then a walkthrough of this is kind of a flow chart that demonstrates the revision process in which the System Planning Committee received the recommendation memo and then deliberates throughout and ultimately develops a recommended version, which goes to the full implementation board. And so at this point, I would love to pass it over to our System Planning Committee Chair to speak a little bit on the work of the subcommittee before we go into our overview of the restructure of the 5-year plan. And so I'll turn it over to Board Member Chalmers.
Thank you, Alexis, and thank you to all of the staff who helped us work through this. I'll just be really brief about this. The System Planning Committee was open to any of our board members, and that included those who have actually, I guess, already been approved by the governing board, but we still have a final approval. But Okesha did take part in that, so we did definitely hear a voice of the Lived Experience Coalition in those meetings. We had anywhere from 4 to 6 or 7 board members participate in each, usually a staff briefing, a discussion, and some ideas about what we as board members were thinking. Most of the time, I think we reached some consensus on that. And as we work through the final adoption of the 5-year plan, I think it's become a improved document. So for those who were able to participate, thank you very much. Put in a few hours. We started with 1-hour meetings and ended up with 2-hour meetings, but really do appreciate the work that you all did. And I'll turn it back to you, Alexis. And again, thank you so much to the staff for keeping us engaged and keeping us up to date and informed.
Thank you so much, board member. And so with that, I am going to pass it over first to our Seattle Subregional Planner, Sparrow Etter Carlson, to take us through an overview of the restructure.
Greetings, greetings all. So this revised plan, as Alexis mentioned, was drafted in response to feedback from over 2,527 comments that were captured in surveys, listening sessions, and feedback from community partners and the general public. I also want to, in particular, thank the Implementation Board Planning System Committee for your time, for your generative feedback, productive criticism, and participation in the revision process. We hope that what we offer up now in this iteration of the 5-year plan is both a truer reflection of your feedback, the shared expertise of our neighbors experiencing homelessness, and the providers who offer care, as well as a more digestible plotting out of the path forward. You can go to the next slide, Alexis. As you can see here, the plan has been restructured under one overarching goal: to bring unsheltered people inside as quickly as possible to prevent death and further harm. This one overarching goal is the true north of all initiatives and actions that fall underneath and must be subsequently actionized. 2 additional key shifts to highlight in this restructured plan are: 1, a shift in metrics that are focused on housing people and system performance, and 2, the revision speaks specifically to the prioritization and sequencing of activities based on KCRHA's current budget. Next slide. Before my colleagues take us through the goals and activities, it's important to ground us in scope and scale. I want to note that although there are many ways to measure homelessness and enumerate how many people our community must bring inside, what we are working from is this. KCRHA found there to be an estimated 13,368 people who experienced homelessness in 2022. And as Anitra from SHARE shared, that of those 13,368, 310 of our unhoused neighbors died while experiencing homelessness last year. And so far this year, 82 human beings have perished while homeless. Beyond highlighting these preventable deaths, it's important to uplift the certain identities and demographics that are disproportionately represented within the homeless community. So pulling an example of that from our 2022 point in time, we found that although only 7% of King County's overall population identifies as Black or African American, 25% of people experiencing homelessness identify as Black. And while similarly, 1% of King County's population identifies as American Indian, Alaskan Native, but 9% of people experiencing homelessness identify within this racial ethnic group. And again, this is likely an undercount. So one thing is clear, regardless of the methodology used to measure homelessness, the current landscape of services does not supply the level of shelter, housing, services, or care required to meet the needs of each person experiencing homelessness. At this point, I'll kick it over to Mallory to walk us through the next number of slides.
Thank you, Sparrow. So in addition to scope and scale of the issue, a really clear picture of how the current homelessness response system is functioning has been elevated as a need within the 5-year plan. So this section of the plan is focused on 3 tiers within and adjacent to the homelessness response system. And we begin with the individual service provider organizations. So we've included elements which address staffing, wages, data and reporting, funding, training, increased acuity level of clients being served, and then deaths related to overdose. Next, please. And then the second tier of this framing looks at the connection between providers. So we've included elements related to data sharing, pathways of referral, for example, coordinated entry, sub-regional gaps in service access and subpopulation gaps, how programs are faring, so considering outcomes, for instance, exits to permanent housing, et cetera, and also how the current system is operating. So this includes navigation between providers, which many folks traverse on their journey. Next, please. Thank you. The third tier of the current system really takes a look at system-to-system connections. So these elements are related to the lack of collaboration and alignment between systems and institutions, limited connective tissue between those entities, which really results in folks falling through the cracks, data sharing, role clarity, and coordination of funding resources to ensure that our investments are strategic are all incorporated in this section. Next slide, please. So ultimately, we're really working to build a homeless response system where individual providers are adequately resourced to carry out their work. Providers are well coordinated with peer agencies, and they have the capacity to contribute to dynamic data collection and tools, and operate in subregions across the county and offer services that address the needs of folks who hold identities that we know are disproportionately represented among our homeless population. And further, to ensure that there are very strong connections between our systems and our institutions to provide supportive transitions for folks and really avoid the unnecessary harm of slipping through the gaps that falls upon a lot of folks who are navigating between those institutions. And now I think I'm going to pass it over to Abby, our South King County planner.
Thanks, y'all. Hi, everyone. My name's Abby. I want to talk about how we get from the 2 states that Mallory just mentioned. So reflecting back on what Sparrow was talking about, the first step and how we get there is bundling everything under one overall goal, which is centered around our mission of bringing unsheltered people inside as quickly as possible. The second element that gets us to the ideal system state is activity sequenced and within budget. So looking at what we're going to do in which years and with the current funding available. And then identifying how we can garner more funding to achieve even more and include innovative new practices within that. So as we go to the next slide, you can see how we're going to measure these new goals. We've shifted our metrics to be tied to be a little bit more broad and less tied to certain objectives. And so each metric will measure our overall progress to the overall goal of bringing unsheltered people inside. And then you can see that it will also be broken down by single adults, families, YYA, youth and young adults, and different household types. Each activity will also include an impact statement, so folks can hold us accountable and we can be transparent in how people can see how we're making progress towards our goal. And those will also be tied back to these explicit metrics. So I can further demonstrate this on the next slide, which is verbatim the metrics as they appear in the plan right now. So you can see that we have simplified it a little bit and enabled us to be able to track our progress over time, looking at the number of households entering and exiting the homelessness response system, among other metrics. And then again, being able to break it down to understand each subpopulation's unique experience of homelessness. So we can move to the next slide for a little snapshot of what is currently in the plan. So this is also verbatim from the memo that you all received in the packet materials today. You can see in the far left column, we have the key actions. So those mirror, but are a little simplified version of the initiatives that we had in the original released version of the plan. We have some topic areas that help center what the work is focused on. And then again, those impact statements that I just referenced, which will help the public understand the impact of each action, but also tie it back to the explicit metrics so that we can see our progress. And then finally, a status column so that we can tell whether or not we've started this work or if it's still upcoming. There will also be a year 3 through 5 table that mirrors this and a go first strategies for new funding options. And with that, I'll kick it back to Alexis.
And that pretty much closes us out, actually. To reiterate, we will continue to hold the system planning subcommittee space on a biweekly basis as we move towards re-releasing a revised version of the plan. But at this juncture, I'm going to turn it back over to the chair to facilitate conversation.
Thank you, Alexis and team. And I see that Ben's hand is up, and then Sarah's.
Thank you. Two reactions from me. One is I was just surprised to see on the list of metrics that we don't have the number of people who are currently experiencing homelessness. Rather, we have a bunch of kind of things that are around that, accessing entries and exits. But you know, the number that I have seared in my mind is the same one that you quoted: 13,400 people as of the last pick count or so. And you know, for whom some 7,000 are unsheltered, and you know that for me needs to be our North Star, particularly the unsheltered number. You know, how do we get that down? And so I would love to see that be front and center in any plan from this authority. And secondly, what we heard today from public comment and what I've heard many times is the need to create more places for people to go so they don't have to be unsheltered, and to do that as quickly as possible. You know, what is happening now with the hotel program is, you know, I know that there were many things to unpack there, but fundamentally there was a group that saw a need to bring people inside as quickly as possible and acted to do so with these hotel vouchers, and now there's just nowhere for them to go except back on the street, and so we're all kind of scrambling. And so in order to be able to get the number of unsheltered people down, we have to create more spaces as quickly as possible. And you know, that I think is captured in the spirit of the plan, but I feel like we've oscillated from a first version of this plan that had us going and building a lot of new housing with a huge amount of money to the current plan, which has us pretty much doing very little in the next year or two. And I wonder if there's a way to have a happy medium. And I know I was the one who was pushing for us to have a plan that kept us within the realm of our budget for the next year or two. But is there something that we can do to reallocate our spending now to do less of the higher cost addition of things like emergency housing or other kind of apartment-based or hotel-based shelters, and shift that into lower cost solutions such as sanctioned encampments, tiny house villages, the kinds of congregate shelter that's about to be opening in Bellevue? You know, given that we have now a really great North Star of trying to bring everybody inside as quickly as possible, and we have a budget envelope that's, you know, largely our current course and speed for spending, what can we do to bring as many people inside as quickly as possible? And
how can we track our progress against that? That's not so much a question as a statement, I apologize, but that's my reaction. And I should have prefaced it by saying thank you so much for the pivot and the hard work that went into this. I think I do agree with John that this is a really great step in the right direction. And I really appreciate the way that you all worked on this so hard over a much longer period than you thought you were, with such good spirit. So thank you for that.
Sarah, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to compliment you guys on this incredibly hard work. And I just wanted to also compliment aspects of the prior approach too that I hope can be emphasized in this new iteration. One of the things that I think Mark and the KCHRA has always done really well is realized that as long our history has been to over-index on emergency responses and not sufficiently on long-term solutions. And as long as what we're doing doesn't at least conceive of how emergency services and responses are going to coordinate with and become part of a transition to a longer term solutions, we will be in exactly the same situation that we're in now. We will just have rotated a bunch more people through shelter. And so I just want to say that bringing people inside quickly, everybody wants people to be housed quickly, but bringing people inside is not quite the same thing as housing. And so I want to make sure that bringing people inside, that the work that the KCHRA does and that our implementation board thinks about as important, that it does not see bringing people inside as the end of the crisis. It's not a solution until we know it's a solution, right? And so I think it's really important that this new mission, this new framing of the mission, does not become code for sweeping people into non-transparent, unhealthy, or harmful locations, or into shelters where we don't care about what happens to them next, or where we don't care about whether their needs and desires are being met. Otherwise we just run the risk of feeding the system that we always have, which is let's hide unsheltered people, as quickly as possible by bringing them inside. Who cares where, and who cares what happens to them after? So I embrace bringing people inside quickly, but I really want whatever happens to this from here out to really be aware that is not the full mission. And it should not be our full perspective, and it should not be the only way that we evaluate whether things are being done well. What matters is what happens to human beings. And we have to be able to see that it doesn't just disappear because they've been shoved into a shelter somewhere temporarily. Thank you, and really great work, all of you.
Thank you for that. Are there any other comments before we move on to the next item? Oh, Lamont, I see your hand up.
Well, thank you, Paula. And I also like to thank the team for their work and for ensuring that, voices of lived experience were included. And I like the piece here around some of the policy pieces. For example, you mentioned changing the eligibility requirements for diversion resources. And, with the LEC, we're finding that the policies can be different from provider to provider. And some of our local policies are even more restrictive than HUD. And so we think of the federal government like, wow, HUD, as having all these barriers. And so I think something that we could really leverage more in our community is rapid rehousing. So right now with the hoteling, we're trying to help some folks move into rapid rehousing, right? They are able to work, they want to work. And so we're connecting them to the rapid rehousing provider. And then they tell us, we need 3 paycheck stubs before we can enroll you in rapid rehousing, right? And so these types of barriers happen. And I can understand why the providers sometimes do that, right? Because they're like, we don't want to put these folks in rapid rehousing for a 6-month program. And now they have this additional rent arrear or this additional hurdle on their record. And so, you know, rapid rehousing, HUD allows rapid rehousing to go up to 24 months. And in some communities, they've gotten waivers for it for up to 36 months, right? And it's housing first. Put people in a unit, no questions asked, put them into a unit, right? And then you work and you wrap the supportive services, you wrap employment, you wrap these other things, right? And especially for our most vulnerable elderly folks and people with high acuity, there aren't a whole lot of permanent supportive housing. So what ends up happening is they're waiting for permanent supportive housing when they should be rapidly rehoused and provide supportive services until a rapid rehousing unit open. So I know there's an affordable housing crisis. I know there are all these things, but there are a lot of low-hanging fruits that we can make tweaks in our community to get people rapidly rehoused, right? And 6 months isn't really realistic. It'll be realistic for some, but that we extend rapid rehousing to the full 24-month period, but we use progressive engagement and we tailor it accordingly. But I just highly recommend that we look at some of those policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Lamont. Michael, and then we'll have CEO Jones.
I appreciate the evolution of the plan. Thank you for the work of the committee, and thank you, Alexis and your team, for the refinement and the willingness to adapt and change. I just want to emphasize a few points, and part of it relates to the public discussion and also relates to the values that underpin the work. I think sometimes we don't give enough attention to the urgency of the crisis that exists. And so we hear from month to month, you know, people basically pleading for more action, and an action that is sustainable, but action nonetheless to help develop, you know, being faithful to the metrics that we set out. So having metrics to help people, you know, no longer experiencing homelessness is very important, and on the path of permanent housing. And that it's transparent. Transparent is not only in terms of the numbers, in terms of sharing the results so that A is A and B is B, and that people in the general public can understand the results. It's also transparency with the different constituencies that work to end homelessness. I think it would be short-sighted to think that KCRHA by itself will solve homelessness. It is not an entity solve homelessness in and of itself, but in collaboration with various partners, the service providers, faith communities, those organizations. I'll use Share a Wheel as an example since they spoke today. People are doing very much their part, and so there's an accountability to them as well. So I just want to emphasize that. You know, and finally, think in a both and sort of way. There's both the immediate need, and there's also the moving toward more permanent supportive units and generating the funding that is there, that is possible. And that requires building relationships across the board with elected officials, with the state, with the feds, as you're doing, and to continue to build on those relationships because that builds a sense of we're working together on this in a collaborative spirit. So thanks for your great work.
Thank you, Michael. CEO Jones?
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, I think it's important to note, so the current like system level policy around rapid rehousing is 24-month subsidy, and we have no system like KCRHA structured system level requirements around income verification or any of that. That is counter to the purpose of rapid rehousing and how we deploy it as a voucher. I would be interested in hearing from either Lamont or any other community member if they are encountering those kinds of requirements from a provider that we fund with rapid rehousing dollars, because that is not in line with policy. My suspicion, if I and this speaks to partnership and why we've developed things like our sort of landlord incentive work, et cetera, is that that's likely an echo through of a landlord requirement, not a not something embedded in rapid rehousing dollars or policy. And so I think that there's a need for some clarity there about exactly where that kind of requirement is coming from. And perhaps KCRHA staff can either work directly with that provider or the landlords that they work with. But I just want to be clear about what the current policy is around that fund source at the system level.
No, thank you. Thank you for that, Mark. And it's not coming from the landlord because it's that initial engagement and enrollment into rapid rehousing. And this particular provider wasn't able to work with the person unless they had 3 paycheck stubs. But we know that that's not a policy of King County Regional Homeless Authority or the COC, but the rapid rehousing policy on the ground level is being implemented widely different from provider to provider. And it creates some barriers at the front door to getting people rapidly rehoused.
Thank you, Lamont. So are there any more questions for Alexis and team before we move on? We're a little behind schedule, so I may ask for an extension of the time.
I just have a quick question to end on here, perhaps. Can you just give us one more rundown of when the text of the plan will be able to be reviewed?
Absolutely. I will actually turn it over to our CEO to discuss next steps on the draft plan release.
Thanks, Alexis. So my understanding is that board members should be in receipt shortly of embargoed copies of the plan text. There's that I think is in flight if it hasn't happened already. We are probably going to aim for our next public release to coincide with not this coming governing committee meeting, but the governing committee meeting after that, right around the time that we anticipate asking everyone to take final votes on it. Maybe a little bit beforehand so that the public has an opportunity, of course, to review. But right now, I think we're trying to button up our, sort of last little bits of feedback. Obviously, I think heard some important feedback from Sarah today about continuing to identify the right sort of landing point between some tensions. And Sarah, actually, if you're open to it, I'd love to ask Alexis's team to connect directly with you to have some of that discussion. So once some of those things are worked through is when we will likely release the next full text draft. But appreciate the feedback from the board today and look forward to incorporating it into the work.
And Mark, would that be the May meeting of the governing board?
I apologize, John, that would be actually the June meeting, I believe, is when the governing committee is slated to take this up to vote.
Okay, perfect.
They will
Thank you.
be receiving, I think, budget in the May meeting.
Awesome. Thank you all. I want to move on to our bylaws. I know that we heard a lot from people in public comment about the bylaws, and so would like to open it to the floor before even calling for any kind of motion. If people on the board have thoughts about the bylaws. Sarah, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. I did hear a lot of feedback. which I actually share about wanting to have a small postponement. It's a very short postponement. As I understand it, the approval of the lived experience positions on the board are imminent. I think it's worth our wait to make sure that we have implementation, the full range of implementation board members, especially through our theory of change, making sure that we have perspectives of people with lived experience as we look at something important like the bylaws. The other thing that I'd like to request is, I'm probably not the only lawyer here, but I have never read a document as tortured as the draft bylaws, and that's not a dig on anybody. It's just that the system, the way the world works, tends to draft these things in such horrible and impenetrable ways that it's very difficult to interpret. So I'm sure I'm not the only implementation board member who found these sort of nightmarish to try to work through. I'd like to invite us to go back to a draft that we had started with that had the proposed language on one side, and then a sort of a translation on the right side to help make sure that all of our members understand what these provisions mean, that we share that understanding. You know, what do we mean when we say theory of change? What do we mean when we say racial equity? You know, what do we mean when we're using these phrases throughout the document, but we may not have a shared understanding of what those words mean. In addition, there are provisions that I've seen some that actually cross-reference 5 different documents, provisions in 5 different documents. And then we're faced with having to find those documents and figure out which provisions they're being referenced to. I think we can work on making them more accessible by actually creating little links that actually make it easy for us to be able to click on it and see what document is being cross-referenced here. And I offer that that sort of feedback to say, I think it would be very powerful for us as a board to feel like we truly not only feel good about the bylaws, but we have thought about whether they're equitable, and that we have some sort of shared understanding by making them more accessible and user-friendly. So that may not be what everybody would expect to hear from a lawyer, but that would be my proposal. And I think that a small postponement might actually give us the time to do that. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Gordon, I see your hand is up.
I echo Sarah Rankin's suggestion or proposal. I also second her rationale, both in terms of the proposed structure does contemplate and does specify lived experience members, and it would be not only awkward, I think it would be somewhat disingenuous to adopt a governing structure without those seats being filled, especially where we are we have the understanding that those seats will be filled in short order. I did chuckle because I read the bylaws in advance of today's meeting, and I have highlighted a couple areas that align with what Sarah spoke to in terms of like, oh, we use a defined term and we haven't defined it, or we use the defined term and it's contained in a different document that's not part of the bylaws. So it does make it, an intriguing puzzle for lawyers and recovering lawyers, and it's probably not very accessible for those who are just trying to understand, the overriding structure of the regional authority. So I think there's some more work to be done, and I think we also need to live into inclusiveness. And so I will be supporting any resolution or proposal to postpone. Thanks.
Thank you, Gordon. CEO Jones.
Thanks. So I offer no perspective on whether or not you all should take up your bylaws today. I do think one of the things, and I've raised this in communication with the advisory committee co-chairs and have discussed internally with staff. I actually think the process by which members are being sat needs to be reworked substantively to fall in line with the process by which all members are sat. So the way that you all, many of you were sat, and the way that the GC, you know, sort of folks have to be sat is like through a nominating committee that, you know, helps to evaluate, cross-reference against the skills charter, et cetera, you know, pull together memos, like make sure that everybody has all the information and everyone, like, you know, has optics into who the candidates are, what's being put forward, et cetera. It also, I think, provides an option, and I think that this was in some of the discussion from public comment today and is in some of the discussion in my inbox, allows for folks who are not members of the LEC, but also have lived experience to participate in, you know, putting themselves forward or putting other people forward. And so in the interest of an equitable and really, you know, clear and transparent and consistent process across all members, what I would like to work with Austin on is ensuring that there's a nominating committee that functions as the central hub for all of the boards, and you know, works then to process all of that work. I think my perspective is that can be done in relatively short order. But I do fundamentally believe at this point that, like, from a just ordinary making regular the sort of work of governance around all of this, that like there needs to be a hub where it happens, that, you know, generates like the same kind of memo with the same kind of backup for every person, and then they go to their respective bodies for confirmation. And right now that just isn't happening. And I think that it is, frankly, producing a bit of chaos. So I would like to make sure that that process improvement gets made, which is, you know, part of what, again, you're on this email chain, Paula, part of what some of the discussion is about. And so I wanted to daylight that for the rest of the board, that is the discussion that is happening in part in my inbox, and just make that recommendation to folks. Thanks.
Thank you. Nate and then Ben.
Yeah, real quick, so we can also get to budget stuff too before our time. I do have a hard stuff before. Hey, you know, I'm looking at the minutes. I was the one who recommended that we postpone this resolution at last month's meeting for the exact same reasons we're talking about at this month's meeting. And so agree with, you know, board member Rankin, McHenry Jr., what CEO Doan's discussed in terms of process, while what Mark was just mentioning, that sitting in many of your unboxes isn't in mine. I lived that as a past co-chair, and just recognizing, hey, we as a board have been operating for nearly 3 years, and we're talking about not establishing our bylaws quite yet. And so really hopeful that is like a foundational operation as a document as an implementation board, that we get this done, and that we really aim to get this done. I'm hearing from everyone that we can get this done in short order. Okay, I really hope that we can get this done at the May meeting then in short order. So I hope this is our second and last postponement in that regard, but I agree with all the reasons why, and hope that the work is dedicated and resources are there to do so.
Thank you, Nate. Ben?
Yeah, thanks. I'm fine postponing it. I actually just want to say thanks to Mark for bringing up, you know, a substantive issue that we need to discuss. This board has not been great at discussing those kinds of substantive issues. And I just want to, you know, we're going to get into this stuff on Friday in our retreat, I'm sure. But I just want to flag this and leave this in your minds. Like this is not about passing bylaws for the sake of passing bylaws. This is about actually reading these documents, understanding what decisions we're making, having a debate about these decisions, you know, agreeing where we can, agreeing to disagree where we can't, and then moving forward. I feel like this has largely just been about, like, I'm fine postponing these bylaws, but I don't understand. Are we proposing them because something is wrong with them? We want to fix it? If so, let's have that conversation and say what needs to be changed about it. Or are we just postponing them because certain people aren't here to vote and we feel like it's a ceremonial thing that we need everyone's votes at this time? I just would like to, I'd like to have more conversations focused on the substance than on the process. And Mark just laid out a pretty meaty issue that we have to think through as a board. And I would love to get into that debate and then make a decision and then move forward.
Thank you, Ben. I wonder if, also having newly read the bylaws again, wondering if this calls for a committee to dive really into the meat of what is being said, how it can be said better that makes it a little more accessible, and then hopefully being able to have our newly lived experience members on board for our May meeting so that we can vote on it. Just wondering what people think about that. And Michael, I see that your hand is up, and so welcome any feedback, but if not, if Michael wanted to just go ahead and speak, that's good too.
Yeah, I just want to underscore transparency in the process. We're publicly accountable, and whatever the next steps are to be able to deliberate appropriately about this important issue, leading toward passage of bylaws, that we be transparent and accountable about what we're saying. This goes also to the impact of an earlier discussion, which meetings are public meetings and which meetings are not. I think the public has a right to know. For example, there's a discussion about a future meeting related to the situation with the LEC. Is that a public meeting or not? The public needs to know what they can attend and how they can, be able to participate fully. And similarly, the LEC, with regard to this process and with regard to the public in general, has a right to know, how we're making decisions and what the discussion is, what the relevant points are, and why we land where we land when we do. So we can strengthen that area of transparency.
Thank you, Michael. Well, we do need moved. So wondering anyone would like to call a motion to bylaws.
It sounds like we wanted to delay a vote until the next meeting. Is that correct? I don't think we need to get into the exact Robert's rules on it. So let's just, if somebody wants to make a motion to bring the bylaws up at the next meeting, that would help us probably.
I move to postpone the vote on the bylaws.
Before we second that and move on, would it, just so that we don't end up with the proverbial can down the road, and I am completely on board with postponing for all the reasons that were shared, but I also get very nervous around no accountability in how we approach then resolving this in the next one, because as Nate pointed out, this exact exercise happened 30 days ago. So I'm just wondering, can we, I'm genuinely tossing this out as an open-ended question. Is there a way that we could structure the resolution that we are going to postpone, but that we'll do something in the next 30 days that actually brings it to closure so that we can actually vote on it in the May meeting? Is that being a little too pedantic? And again, I'm just totally putting out there as an open-ended question.
No, I think that's the right question, Christopher. I mean, I threw out the potential of having a committee that could be dedicated to looking at this and sharing with the rest of the board in the same ways that John has led the 5-year planning committee. We could create another committee specifically around the bylaws and be very transparent about that.
I feel like we have to be resolute about we're postponing it and we're going to do the homework to bring it to closure in a respectable period of time. I mean, we're late is late. There can't be less late or more late at this point. It's the damage is done being this late, but I want to get it right. So
totally agree. So we just need someone to call the resolution. or the motion?
Sarah, do you mind revising your motion?
I don't. I don't know how to, what the rules are, what the procedure might be, but I think that I would take Christopher's suggestion as a friendly amendment to the vote or to the motion. I don't know if I can do that because I know you had a lot of things to say, but I think establishing a committee makes sense. In my mind, I would like to make sure that that committee also has participation. I actually think it could be a very helpful onboarding process for some of our new members with lived experience who will hopefully be confirmed before then, among others who might like to participate. I also think that a committee like that would have to have, part of the reason we have the gobbledygook that we do is because it came from elsewhere. It did not come from the implementation, sort of from the ground up from the implementation board. I think there were some lawyers involved and some other staff. So it's not something that the LAC could handle. I think would be appropriate for the LAC to handle on its own. But I think if we had cross-sector sort of representation on this committee, it could be a very useful exercise and would address Christopher's concern. So I don't know what that does in terms of, I don't know how to word the motion, but I move that we postpone the voting on the bylaws and before our next meeting that we convene a committee. I don't know that a committee needs to be approved by a vote, but that we convene a committee to ensure that some of the substantive work is advanced before our next meeting.
Thank you,
Sarah, would you mind just a committee has to be a public meeting. So that has to establish it. Well, actually, it doesn't have to establish a date. It could be a special meeting. So if that is, and I would suggest either ask people to take part or do what we did with the review committee, which was establish it essentially as a committee of the whole, and any IB member who wishes to take part may do so.
I would second that.
So
we have a Frankenstein of a motion here. Yeah, I'm not sure how to put it all together.
I've been called worse.
Yeah, do we have to approve committees by a vote? A committee of the whole?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I have two motions. One is to postpone the vote on the bylaws. The second is to establish a committee as member Chelmaniak has articulated that would advance the substantive work on the bylaws. So those are two separate motions. Chair, I'll leave it to you procedurally if you want to get seconds on both, or if this is just like a compound motion or how this works. I don't know.
I'm okay with a compound motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Awesome. So it passes. So we will create a committee that will be public. And we will amend the bylaws and have it ready, hopefully, fingers crossed, by May. And I just wanna say that I know that we are at 4 o'clock. We do have to get to this budget situation. And so I am wondering if people are able to stay on because I believe that we do need quorum for this next conversation.
Yes.
Gordon, with a question, how long do you anticipate? I'm supposed to be in another meeting, but this is a priority. Is it like 15 minutes, do you think?
I think 15. Oh, sorry, Mark.
So we can move quite quickly through it. I think I mean, let me be frank, like the materials are in your packets. It's a supplemental budget year. So, you heard some of that in public comment. Like we operate in a biennium. The supplemental budget ask is roughly $12 million. We are asking for your permission to begin the discussion. Like you are authorizing us to negotiate about it, right? Like this is the submittal. This is not the budget. As we saw last year when we were going through our first budget, There's lots of discussions that happen with the executive offices and the councils over the course of the summer and the fall that then get us to, what actually is going to be true. KCRHA staff identified for the purposes of the supplemental programs that were going to be heavily impacted by lapses in one-time funding. Some of these programs are suffering cuts of the entire budget if the one-time funding lapses, some at 60%, 30%, so significant cuts to function. The other asks are related to authority staffing, and so identified some gaps in operations, particularly in finance and HR. And then policy development, and asking for 2 grant-funded positions to be moved on to a stable fund source. Again, these would be discussions that we would be then going into with our funders to assess, availability. And I am obligated to say, I think it's important for the public to know and for you all to know. It's a down revenue year broadly, and so we just need to be very conscientious of being clear about the need, and going into our discussion also aware that it is going to for the executives and the councils be up against a number of other really critical competing needs, and so we should not expect that everything in the supplemental ask will be funded. So that said, we could move directly into voting if folks were comfortable after a very brief presentation, or we could go through the whole presentation. It is the decision of the board.
Do anyone have thoughts as far as time? Mark, do you think 15 minutes would be okay to go through the presentation and do a vote, or do you think it'll go a lot deeper if people had a lot of questions?
If people have a lot of questions, then this will go on for 45 minutes. And, I think that, we could get through like the summary slide, which is the most important aspect, I think, in 5 minutes. But it's, we do have to do this because we have to be able to authorize to discuss it with the governing committee. So.
Awesome. Lamont, I see your hand up, and then Ben.
Thank you, Paula. Just for a point of clarification, Mark, you're saying that we are not taking a vote to approve a budget, but to approve King County Regional Homeless Authority to engage in discussions with the governance board about the budget?
Yeah, so this is the submittal phase of budget. So our budget process, as I believe is also outlined in the packet, is that at this time of the year, this is when we put together submission. Those submissions then are vetted by implementation board and governing committee, then are transmitted to the executive offices, at which point KCRHA and the executive offices begin discussion about the submissions, right? So where is the backup material? Can you talk about what this cost is for? Like, how did you get to this, et cetera, et cetera. We do that all through the summer. Then the budget offices finalize their recommendations to their respective executives. The executives then make their final decisions and transmit their budgets to their respective council. Council deliberations on the budgets begin and are finalized typically in November, at which point we then understand what is actually funded. Then we come back to you all and ask for actual approval on the budget once we understand what is funded and like what we will have money to do. So this phase is submittal and discussion. It is not what is actually going to be done with money.
Thank you for that, Mark. Ben, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. So is there a budget committee of the board that is meant to review this? I know Damien is a treasurer and is not here, but does anybody know if we have a committee that goes over the budget? It's I wasn't here for this process last year.
There has been a standing budget committee. Damian chairs it as the treasurer. And my understanding is that again, those meetings spin up as we really go into making the budget happen. But I do believe, I'm looking at, yep, this has been presented to Damian and he signed off on it. My understanding is that Nate and Simha were not at that meeting. Simha often delegates this directly to Damian.
I am absolutely not comfortable voting on anything related to a budget without having gone through it in detail. And I just, and especially if it hasn't been through a committee, I just don't think we can.
I just said it has been through a committee. There are standing meetings every 2 weeks. Damian is the treasurer. Simha and Nate, I believe, missed the meeting of this briefing and had delegated their approval to Damian.
Sorry, so is the committee is just Damian, or it's Damian and Simha
and Nate?
And Nate.
Yeah, that's right.
That is the first I've ever heard of that. Perhaps, I mean, I'm not sure where I would have assumed I would have known about that, and I certainly would have wanted to have joined. I think that generally it's practice that board members can join committees even if they're not on them. So I'll just speak for myself. I don't know anything about this budget, and I'm not comfortable voting on it.
Okay. Do we need a motion to extend the meeting? I mean, we're obviously like 9 minutes over. And wondering if we need a motion.
You don't need to, I don't believe you need a formal motion to extend the meeting, but I think members have expressed that, you know, they need to go. And, you know, I will confess this is alarming to me because at this point in the process, for the board not to take up the budget means we'll be delayed in presenting it to the governing committee, which will throw off when we can submit it to the city and the county, which is stipulated inside our MSAs. It is likely then that you will need a special meeting, and you know, I just have to express my alarm.
I would also just
you'll likely need to schedule that special meeting like in the next week.
I hear you, Mark. I find it concerning as well. But there's a lot of things this board needs to do, including the CEO review, including the bylaws, all these things that haven't been done, and but none of those things can be rushed through in my mind. And I speak only for myself. I think the budget is pretty much the most important thing that we do, and it has to be done right.
So I'm gonna ask that we have Meg go over at least at a minimum the overview page, and then we can take questions from there.
Okay.
Let's move.
Yes.
That's my feeling.
Okay. Just let me get them.
Yeah. After we get through it though, I do want to speak to the timing of this.
And Gordon here, Meg, when you are ready to do the overview, can you tell me what page you're on of the packet?
Sure.
I have the packet open.
Yeah, I'm on I will go to slide 12 of the PowerPoint. I'm just trying to find where I can share my screen. Just give me a second.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that works too if you're going to share.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm looking through this packet for the budget, and I'm not seeing it, and I didn't see it when I looked through it earlier, so I feel very behind here. Austin, do you know what page in the packet?
It starts on page 55 of the packet sent.
My packet is 52 pages. Is that?
There was one released yesterday. Yes. In an email titled, "Please read April meeting packet final," from me.
Okay, so this is our proposed 2024 budget. As you can see, we've broken it out with the total funding $250,013,983. And that represents funding from the City of Seattle, King County, North King County ILA, HUD Continuum of Care, Department of Commerce, right-of-way funding, anticipated Medicaid reimbursement in support of the Partnership for Zero program, for total funding approved or estimated in the case of the Medicaid reimbursement of $249,134,393. The note there is that we are estimating about 85% of Partnership for Zero costs will be reimbursed by Medicaid. We anticipate we should be able to carry forward the difference there, which is about $890,000 from 2023 into 2024 to cover that gap. That will we will have sufficient underspend so that we don't have to ask for additional funding to support that program in 2024. And the context here is that the city and the county both approved biennial budgets. The 2023 and 2024 budgets were both approved at the same time at the end of 2023. And so our budget, it represents more this year, a report of funding that has been allocated to us and what it's been allocated for. And so because of the in past years, we've had requests for other sort of larger types of programmatic funding for new programs or enhanced programs, or to increase the money that's available for existing programs. But with the understanding from both our major funders, especially, which are really the two processes that we're timing this to, revenue is pretty dire, and that there really isn't a point necessarily to asking for additional funding at this time, given the lack of there's no money for us to ask for. So this is not a hugely discretionary action at this point, just because of the limitations of what's already been approved for 2024 and the pretty significant revenue challenges that are faced by our funders. So this represents what you're looking at here represents sort of, like I said, more of a presentation and an acknowledgement of funding that has already been approved for the RHA in 2024 and what it's been approved for.
Meg, can I ask some clarifying questions?
Yeah,
Paula,
of course.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, so I just want to make sure I understand this.
Go ahead.
All these numbers here represent nothing discretionary on the part of the RHA. This is all just what's been handed to us.
Yes.
And is all the funding that we get from the funders earmarked down to this level of specificity? Or do we have discretion in any of the funding that of how we spend the money?
The funding is broken down by at this level of the program description. There's not a lot of flexibility between those program categories for us to sort of move money between, unless we ask our funders to amend their budgets.
So just to be clear, if we said, you know what, we don't like the villages program, we think we are better off spending the money on enhanced shelter, we don't have that ability. We have to go back and ask the funders to make that change.
Yeah, not without a shift in on their side for the budget. We'd have to get approval to do that. It would be an amendment to our master services agreements with our funders as well, which lay out the budgets based on what was approved by their respective councils.
And so they came to us with like the $20 million swing, and I guess I have a lot of detailed questions. I won't get into the details here. But
well, the $20 million is also largely, if you look up here at the permanent supportive housing. So we are going to be taking on the full all of the COC contracts starting in 2024. It's not actually increased funding to the overall system. It represents a lot of permanent supportive housing contracts that are currently still administered by the county as the former continuum of care, are going to be transitioned to the RHA in 2020 throughout 2023 at different points in 2023. As the county contracts expire, new RHA contracts will be initiated for those services. And so the funding is showing up in our budget, but it's always been in the system. It's just showing up in our budget instead of the county's budget.
See, thank you. This is very helpful. I have many more detailed questions, but I will hold off.
And the materials in the packet that went out yesterday afternoon also include some more granular, in response to a lot of feedback that we've gotten in past budget presentations. There are some more granular schedules that describe revenue and expenditures by funding sources, and a little more detail on the operations budget by source. So you should hopefully, and there's a lot of footnotes trying to explain where we thought there might be questions about changes that you would see in the different slides. So hopefully that is also helpful. And you can always email me as you're reviewing those, and I'll get back to you with any,
Excellent. Thank you.
hopefully
Yeah.
answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, and the call we had last time when we went through this was very helpful as well. I know you're
Yeah.
the weeds here, so thank you for that.
No problem. But yeah, I would definitely encourage you to look at those schedules as well. There's a lot more detail around, but again, all of this funding was we're in the second year. These budgets are for all intents and purposes. I think there's some sort of floating changes that might happen within, but I wouldn't expect there to be, depending on what happens with the conversations that are laid out as sort of potential supplemental adds for to address one-time funding for programs that isn't there in the 2024 budget, and also some additional staffing that that we are hoping to see potentially supported to try and give us a little more stability on the operations side with the RHA. Those would be the only changes we'd be looking for if there is a possibility of additional funding.
Meg, do you mind moving to the recommendations just so that we can be really clear on what the
not at
ask
all.
is here? And then John,
Yeah.
I see your hand up.
So the recommendations is to approve the total budget, the budget, and instruct us to transmit that to the governing committee, authorize us to submit that to the city and the county, those portions of the budget to the city and the county. And then as a part of that process as things are going through the process of the city and the county completing their, the city and county executives completing their supplemental proposals the second year of the biennial budget, we would be having conversations potentially with them about the, as I said, funding to address those those programs that are currently operating with one-time funds that will go away if they don't, if they are not continued, and then also funding for added staff at the RHA.
Thank you for that, Meg. John, I see your hand up. Did you have a question?
There I am. So let's just talk about the one-time funding. So we had one-time funding for it for some programs. Number one, where did that one-time funding come from? And number two, is the recommendation that we get new funding for those programs from King County or the city of Seattle?
So I'm sorry, Mark, were you going to say something? Was that Mark?
Yeah, it was me. So the majority of the one-time funding is COVID money that implemented in budgets prior to RHA's existence, and then was moved over to us. The vast majority of it has flowed through rapid rehousing, some enhanced shelter, and then what's called COVID mitigation supports to shelters, all of which are set to sunset. There are some programs that have integrated one-time funding do their budgets like in a more ongoing programmatic way, or were stood up using one-time funding. It's those programs that we've isolated as having, you know, substantive impact and are recommending that we have further discussion about.
And all of those programs are actually laid out in Schedule A that was attached to the budget materials. So the names of each specific project and the percentage of their total budget that is supported with that one-time funding.
Okay, so there's a reason they call it one-time funding. It should never be used expecting it to be ongoing funding. And that's just that in my mind is a financial policy. If this is the most important place to spend it, then that's a good thing to ask the county and the city for. And is that your recommendation, that these are the ones that you're going to ask for are so critical that that's what we need to do to basically turn the one-time programs into full-time?
Yeah, two things. One, I share your assessment that one-time money is one-time money. And the team and I have had a number of discussions about some confusion, frankly, that we've had about implementation. But we weren't here for some of the implementation. And, you know, frankly, it happened in a prior mayoral administration. Like you know, we can't speak to it. What we can analyze is the amount of one-time funding that is going into operating of certain programs. And to your second question, John, make the recommendation that they should be continued. So, for example, one program, which would be Sunset in its entirety, is a diversion fund, which we believe is very important, right? It keeps people from entering the homelessness system, right? Another program is a youth shelter that should stay open. So where we have isolated the things that have significant impact are things that we absolutely do think, you know, if we can make the case to the city and the county, again, inside the revenue constraints that they have, we feel comfortable saying, like, this is where ongoing fund source should go. But also, again, want to recognize it's a discussion with our funders. And, you know, we you know, they will be balancing that against a lot of other people and agencies saying, you know, here is a best use of ongoing fund source.
Okay. Then I'd like to just ask a quick question on the staffing and the staffing increases. Can you do a little bit more of a run through of what these positions are and why they are needed and what happens if we don't get the funding?
Yes, of course. So the positions that are allocated in this proposed staffing ask is a CFO and 2 financial analysts to provide some additional capacity for our administration, particularly again in the finance. You know, Meg has done a really great job. Tiffany's done a really great job. Our work has become much more complex as we have, you know, as we've grown and have more fund sources, et cetera. And I think that, you know, after some discussion, particularly with some of our city partners and internally, have identified, you know, the need to really boost some capacity there and provide you know, really get our hands around that aspect. We also have requested 3 HR positions. We have a growing staff and a complex staff. And if we go into executive session, I can tell you some of the things that I think are leading us to have concern around that. And then the 2 policy positions, we cannot keep up with the amount of actual policy making that we need to be doing, right? So, and when I say that, what I mean is like quite like drafting of like, here is the SOP for this, here is what we expect to see for this, here, like, et cetera, et cetera. Some of those things would need board approval, some of them need to be included in RFPs, et cetera. But like there is substantive drafting and creating of good policy that needs to be done. And then the 2 grant funded positions, one is a policy position. It's our Senior Director of Policy, Jeff Sims, who many of you have interacted with. And then our Youth Policy Coordinator, who works on our program team and really holds the, the YAB work and all the other important youth work. That position is funded on a 2-year grant from the Rakes Foundation, and we are looking to ensure that that has an ongoing fund source separate from our philanthropic partners.
Okay, I'm going to support this. I had a nice discussion with Austin yesterday regarding packets and timing and that sort of thing, because I couldn't find this, and then realized that it was coming out on April 11th, the night before the meeting. That can't continue to happen. We've got to have this material in advance, especially on something as important as this, and have the ability to talk with folks like Meg and get our questions answered. So going forward, I'd really like to see some of what he's thinking about of getting material out to us earlier, which creates staff deadlines. I understand that, but I'd really like to see that.
I appreciate that, and we can work on that. Some of this is my fault. I'd asked for some late additions to the memo. I will again lift up that bi-weekly budget committee meeting, which has been happening for quite some time, and can certainly circulate the invitation to that. And then I also would just say that if folks have questions about like any of the RJ operations, please do reach out to Austin and myself, and we can work to connect you with appropriate staff at any point in time, separate from the ongoing board work.
Can you all hear me? Okay, now you can hear me. I will say, John, that Austin did say in the email that they are dedicated to getting the board information out a week ahead of time.
Yes.
So they did acknowledge that. We did get it a little bit later than I think was anticipated. Lamont, I see that you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'll make it quick because of time. But I'm referring to the Schedule B revenue on page 75. And I remember, I'm glad that we're spending this time, because a mentor once told me that budgets are policy documents, and they really illustrate where our values are. And so I wonder, with the HUD continuum of care on that Schedule B on page 75 under other sources, it says like 68 million. And that number seems really low. I thought it was like 90 million. And then I'm also curious, I know that we applied for the continuum of care. The HUD released a supplemental NOFO, Notice of Funding Opportunity, for unsheltered homelessness. And I know that we're like, we have the second largest unsheltered homeless population in the nation, statewide. And I know we're up there in the top 3 locally in Seattle, King County. And I think this is going to be bringing in 50 million into our community. So does that include the recent award that we got for the unsheltered NOFO in this 2024 revenue is my first question. And then my second question is, I know the ILA and charter talks about us really leaning into equity-based decision-making frameworks for these things like budgeting and so forth. And could you share a little bit about how that equity-based decision-making framework was applied? And lastly, I agree with Ben. I don't think any lived experience, folks from the lived experience seats were part of the finance committee, and this information came kind of really last minute. So I would have to abstain, because I don't feel like I would, be able to have enough time to process. Thank you.
My answer on the HUD questions is straight. We didn't, that is not the amount of money that we received through the COC. We actually received more money through our COC application this year. Peter is not on the call, but Jeff might be able to provide the detail there. I know he often tracks those things. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Jeff, but that anyway, the point is we do not receive $90 million in COC money, and the unsheltered NOFO we were not awarded, and are seeking a debrief with the HUD SNAP's office on why. Jeff, you came off.
Just to say that apologies, I don't have that number readily available, but Lamont, I can follow up with you afterwards.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Well, and then the last
Just
piece.
add that the amount for the COC will be updated when we have that money on contract.
Oh, thank you. And then the last piece, it's disappointing that we weren't awarded because, wow, and then the last piece around the equity-based decision-making framework. I know the ILA and charter, requires that. Could you share how you utilize that with this work?
So part of how we looked at programs were programs that, serve who they serve, right? So, for example, that diversion fund primarily serves folks of color, et cetera, et cetera. So we did look at, again, in thinking through which programs to elevate, there was thinking about, do these serve the folks who are most impacted, et cetera. I think that the broader questions, I want to table, I think, some of the broader questions about how we think budgeting can get done moving forward. I know Mike and I have had a lot of discussion about how budgeting process can be more participatory broadly. But we are looking forward to implementing that, I think, in the next biennial budget, when we're actually doing the budget and not just, doing supplemental.
Okay, yeah. If you could send us any analysis that you've had from that equity-based decision-making framework, and also the equity-based decision framework template that you're utilizing, I think that'll be helpful.
I think the other thing I would just underline is that we had very little flexibility, as I was saying before, with what was, funded in the biennial budgets, and just all the messages we were receiving about very little, there's just not a lot of space for the budget that was already approved for us to grow. But I will say that one thing I'm really excited about for developing that next biennial budget is all of the work that was done and rooted in the equity-based decision-making framework around the 5-year plan and developing the 5-year plan. And once that's adopted, our budgets would obviously grow out of that. And be influenced by all of that work that went into developing the plan, and that's what the money is for bringing that plan into reality. And so I would say that we would have every intention of leveraging all of that work and all of that time that people put into shaping the plan.
So I just want to say that we don't have quorum, so we will actually have to call a special session. And so we'll work with Austin to get something on the book. So hopefully we can get the information that we need. The board members will have time to dig into the packet that Austin sent out, and we will we'll get something on the calendar so that we can get this to the governing board. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
A motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. See y'all later.
Thank you, Paula, for your role as co-chair.
Thank you, Paula. Great job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome
All right.
job.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Awesome job, Paula.